Hello, everyone.
Hi, Anna.
Hello.
Hello.
Guess we're waiting a couple more minutes for everyone to join.
We can go ahead and get started, and as others join us, they can drop in. Hello, everyone. Mariah, who's your normal host, had a family emergency today, so she's out taking care of that. So I told her I would do the welcome, which I have done previously. So this is the next part of our training series, and today is part 2 of the shell checks. And this is the mid-quarter shell check in the LMS. So as we did last time, we're just going to kind of cover what the process is and what we're looking for. And again, these checks are just to provide information. So they're not to be prescriptive or punitive in any way. They're just meant to provide some information to all of you to help guide our faculty to better support our students. So reminder that we are recording this session. If you may have noticed in the upper left, the little recording button is on because Mariah set these meetings up. She set it to just start recording right away once we opened up. So we have been recording this. But as usual, if you would like to not be recorded, you may turn off your camera and audio. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Anna, who's going to do, as she's done another wonderful job walking us through this shell check.
Thank you, Scott. So as was mentioned previously during our previous session, MidQuarter shell review is a natural continuation of the initial shell review, with being more specific and more targeted towards certain components of the course shell. Initial shell review is more delineated, more specific, and quicker to do. As a little bit of a recap, when you're doing initial shell review, you're checking really quickly whether welcome announcement and week 1 announcement are available in the student view. You're checking whether faculty information is in place, whether total grade column is set up correctly. So this type of straightforward information we're looking into. For the mid-quarter shell review, we'll focus on 3 components of the course shell: the announcement section, the discussion board, and the grade center. So without further ado, I'm going to share the screen. And Scott, would you mind letting me? It's currently disabled.
Let's see. Let me see if I can. Does that work?
Yes, perfect. Thank you so much.
Okay. Yes.
So for the mid-quarter review, we're still going to target this component of the power-ups system, faculty engagement review, which is housed under when you go into the main page, it's housed under course nominations and then faculty engagement review, or abbreviated to FE review. To your left, you can see a brief checklist of requirements for the mid-quarter shell review. And I believe you were introduced to a more detailed breakdown. Hopefully you were able to, you had time to look into this. This is more of like a general recap, and we will of course discuss each of the components in more detail. Midterm shell review is conducted during weeks 4 through 8, and it may include in-class observations for mixed mode and in classes. In the virtual setting, it's kind of course, the in-class session observations are not required, and they're primarily, and they're not required every quarter. Primarily, they are used for checking instructors' performance, occasionally checking instructor performance, and especially checking those instructors that are new to the system. Excuse me, if you don't mind, please mute your mics if you're not speaking. Thank you so much. So we capture the clear audio in the end. The purpose of the midterm shell review is to evaluate instructors' performance and provide timely recommendations. So as you can see, weeks 4 through 8, it means that this type of shell review is more dispersed. And of course, it takes kind of getting used to and knowing your faculty, but predominantly, at least based on my own experience, the instructors who are teaching the first term and also the instructors that are usually experiencing a lot of issues in the course shells are the priority. So they're the ones who are checked first, and then those who are performing up to standard or are exceeding standard for every single term, we are kind of leaving them for the later part of the shell review process. As you can see to your right, some of the things that we look into as we conduct midterm shell review is we are checking for the announcements. For the standard requirement, there's a minimum of 1 customized announcement posted each week with meaningful content. And by customized, I mean that there's most of the master shells, or quite a few of the master shells, contain templates for the announcements. So not just using those templates that are provided, but taking time to customize them and incorporate some additional information, that's something that is expected from the instructors. For discussion boards, the School of Business and Management, the School of Technology and Computing requires to respond to 100% of initial threats and student introductory assignments. So getting to know the students and taking time to engage with their introductory posts. So kind of establishing rapport before the start of the course. Of course, there are certain accommodations to the courses that have a large amount of students enrolled, because if there's 30 or 30 plus students in the course shell, it's difficult, and we understand that it's difficult to engage with every single initial thread and the amount of detail that you might want to. So we allow for, with some variation, to brief responses in this section. Well-maintained Q&A section, it means that the responses are provided timely, so the instructor is not waiting for a week or more to get to those questions, and the students are not left behind trying to solve the problems on their own. For weekly discussion boards, we require a minimum of 50% of initial threats to be responded to on a weekly basis, and we will go into the requirements into more detail. For the grade center, again, we are double checking for the total grade column to be equal to Selden points. Of course, that's something that we check at the beginning for the initial shell review, but again, it doesn't guarantee that the issues won't persist later in the quarter, because grade center is constantly being worked with and grades are being posted And so, of course, some minor issues might creep in, which might distort the original standard setup. Some of the issues might be in extra credit points, or some of the rubrics were activated or columns were activated that shouldn't have been, and so it's added some additional points to the total grade column. We ensure that grading is performed in a timely manner. If, for instance, we're going into the course shell during the week 6, middle of the week 6, and grading is not yet done for the week 5, it's fine. But if there's several weeks, if the instructor is several weeks behind in grading, that's something to pay attention to. And of course, if there's nothing that has been graded at that point, that really is a problem. It might be a signal for the instructor to be switched mid-course. Rubrics and feedback section are used consistently. By that we mean there's some kind of accommodation allowed for the rubrics not to be used if for minor assignments if the student receives full points. So that's something, as long as there's some feedback provided, you can skip using the rubrics. But if there's something is wrong, certain points were not awarded, we require the instructors to use the rubrics and specify the breakdown. So where exactly in which component the student has lost the points. So moving on to the next slide, we are going to review the midterm shell review form in the Power Apps system, which is designed specifically to make the evaluation easier for both the admin support who's going to the shell and to the admin faculty who reviews the advanced observations afterwards. So just to let you know, the way it is set up in the system, you can't conduct the mid-quarter shell review. You can't start completing the mid-quarter shell review before you do the initial shell review. It's kind of completed in steps. So it has to, the initial shell review needs to be initiated for the course shell in order for the update button to be enabled for the mid-quarter shell review. There are certain modes, as was mentioned previously by Mariah, that are exempt from the review, and those include experiential learning, individual learning contract or ILC, project thesis, the courses that are at the per head count, and the capstone courses. And that's primarily due to more specific format in which they are conducted. Drop-down controls at the top are used for controlling presence or absence of certain components and assigning a grade based on each of the criteria. For instance, announcement, discussion board, and gradebook feedback has a 1 through 4 point range, and then gradebook status has 1 through 3 point range. Some of the controls are the regular ones. So like course manager action taken, it was previously in the initial review. It's either call or email the instructor or other actions. Week, you're specifying which, the admin is specifying which week the review has been completed. We specify the review date and we specify the review status in the same way as we do for the initial shell review. There's a section for course manager to provide comments after the review is complete. And there's also a text box for the reviewer to provide their input. There's the drop-down controls are pretty detailed. So it was specifically created to make the midterm shell review as easy as possible. So all of the drop downs for the most part capture the most common issues, and those are the ones that we will be discussing in more detail in the subsequent slides. Targets either the most common issues or the most common observations in the course shell. So either it's a standard and it explains in detail what the standard implies, or for announcements, it will be, for example, some templates are visible or nothing is available, or the post announcement posts are too mechanical. For discussion board comments, it can be insufficient amount of instructor participation, no instructor participation. At standard, exceeds standard, uses the discussion board to springboard student engagement and to facilitate the learning experience. So things like that. Gradebook status comments, it's predominantly whether gradebook is set at standard or whether the total grade column is outside of the standard amount of points. And for the gradebook feedback comments, it's predominantly targets the use or absence of such for the rubrics and the feedback section. I would say that even though the drop-down controls are very straightforward, I still use the reviewer comments once in a while to specify where exactly the issue occurred. Also, I find the screenshots to be very helpful in documenting issues, because since the course shells are enabled only for a certain time frame, screenshots kind of provide this evidentiary support about the instructor performance. So if we notice any type of issues in the future courses, we can go back to that type of documentation in the previous courses and assess whether the instructor has had issues and what has been changed over the time frame. Additionally, that's something that we started to incorporate more rigorously in the recent quarters, is we try not to only contact instructors when they do something wrong, and also try to uplift them and encourage them when they're doing something right and when they're innovating. So just letting them know that their hard work is acknowledged, and letting them know that these types of things that they're introducing are welcome, and we're excited about the innovations that they implement in their courses. I think it's very important to support our instructors in such a way and let them know that they're doing a wonderful job. Also, another thing that we utilize, some of the course shells, I'm not sure, I know that that's something that is implemented in School of Business and Management, not sure about other schools. There's a midterm feedback that students can provide, and this can be either anonymous or non-anonymous. So we try to look into that section as well to see what are general sentiments about the course, what are some of the components that students are enjoying, and just making sure that student voices are heard. And also it gives a hint to the reviewer as well, whether certain things that they're noticing are valid. Like for instance, if the instructor is implementing a certain practice and in the discussion boards, we are able to see whether it receives a positive response or students would like to see something else instead. And also normally students provide a lot of really great suggestions for the course moving forward. So we value their input and we use it to make our course shells better. So for the next slides, we are going to provide a more detailed breakdown of good versus poor practices. And I broke it down for each of the sections. So announcement, discussion board, and gradebook. So as you can see, columns on the left are some of the practices that are welcome. So they're either at standard or exceed standard. And to your right, you can see practices that we would hope not to observe in the course shells. They are paired kind of like a juxtaposition to each other. So a minimum for the announcements is at least one weekly. And so we would like to see those announcements to be customized and to be well maintained and to be complete. So some of the things that are great practices is incorporating overview of the previous week, mentioning some of the important points for the current week, providing additional resources, multimedia links to get this more of the variety, not only for the visual learners, but also for those who are more audio, just to make the course experience more engaging and fun. And also make sure that the communication between instructor and the student keeps going and it's not stagnant, so it's not exactly the same all the time from term to term. So it responds to the current requirements and current needs of the students. Of course, the tone of each announcement must be friendly and encouraging. Some practices we don't encourage include the announcement that are posted sporadically, announcements that are too neutral and mechanical. And by that, I mean if the instructor just kind of copies the requirements from the schedule. So you need to read this chapter and you need to complete these by this due date. Of course, that's something that needs to be reiterated but at the same time, if that's kind of same like the to-do list and something that students can easily retrieve from their course schedule, that's not something that really helps them in their learning experience. Also, we don't encourage when announcements are just duplicated from the muster shell, because that's minimal work that an instructor is doing in the course. So we can mark it as a standard with the minimal adjustments, but we do hope that instructor uses announcement section first more frequently to communicate any type of updates, and also puts in effort to provide some current information and update the information in that section, that part. Some of the additional ideas that were received well by the students and were greatly encouraged include sharing current resources and articles, so the ones that are up to date from this year, from the previous year, recording short video announcements. So instead of typing in the text, just recording the video with yourself. And it gives a little bit of this extra engagement and establishes better rapport, especially in the conditions of the virtuals when we are meeting all the time, we are meeting virtually. In the pandemic situation. Creating voiceovers for PowerPoints, there were some of the great examples that we observed where the instructor would create a voiceover for a PowerPoint to kind of provide that additional explanation to each slide. Addressing most common inquiries from the student as well as challenging aspects of the assignments. So if there's recurring questions about the same portion of the assignment or about the same aspect of submission, the instructor can just create a post and put this information in there so it's accessible for all of the students. Also check-ins. By check-ins, I mean congratulating with the major holidays, or just encouraging the students, letting them know that they're doing really well, or pointing out some of the things that are worthy of their attention, something they need to pay specific attention to. So that's it for the announcement section. For the discussion boards, I mentioned it previously for the frequency of the participation. So Q&A section maintained consistently, that's something that we pay a lot of attention to, because there are sometimes situations where we understand totally the amount of work that it takes, and of course the amount of additional responsibilities that each instructor has. But if there's questions from the students that are kind of lingering there with no response for several weeks, and that's something that kind of signals that there's something wrong in this course shell. And especially if the students are getting back in that same Q&A section and telling we were trying to reach out to the instructor via email and I'm still waiting for the response. So even if the question of the student was addressed in the via email, it's still good practice, and quite a few of our instructors do that. They would post that themselves in the Q&A section. So that's the type of question I received. That was my response. So basically copy paste from their inbox. And so the students, if that's a common question and the students would have it again, they can go into the Q&A section and kind of browse through it. Also, some instructors create frequently asked questions thread where they would post some of the questions that they were encountering quite commonly for the specific course, especially if they teach that course for quite a while now. Instructor takes time to respond to each initial thread in SIA and get to know the students. It can be as brief as several sentences of acknowledging that they are welcome in the course and they can get back to the instructor with their questions and concerns. Something we don't really encourage is practically identical responses in each thread. We understand that, again, the amount of work that maintaining a course shell and teaching the course entails, but we do hope to see, even if there's a welcome one sentence, there's at least an attempt to make some variety to that. Instructor responds to at least 50% of initial threats on a weekly basis. And that helps a little bit with the sampling as well, because admins are not technically required to go into every single thread. They're kind of, especially when you have to go through multiple shells, you're kind of sampling. So if you're opening every single thread and every second or every third thread, you're kind of able to see the pattern over the time. And if there's sufficient performance, you are able to pinpoint it right away. But at the same time, one of the practices that I was personally implementing is for the course shells, when I was noticing that there's no participation, in order to make sure that there's in fact no participation present, I would go into every single initial thread and would check there and would read through it and make sure that there's in fact nothing that I'm missing. But it's something that is not required, to be honest. So there's a minimum of 50% engagement, and that's something that needs to be kept at that. It's part of the standard rubric that we use. Instructor responses are meaningful and benefit the discourse. So again, it's not only about the quantity, it's also about the quality. The instructor can respond to 100% of initial threats, but at the same time, not providing any of the useful insights. You know, of course, it's very, very personal. It depends from person to person. So it's natural that when one individual goes, they see one thing, and when the other individual goes, they might have a completely different insight about this. So that's partly why taking the screenshots is an excellent practice. So being able to document examples of instructor responses, if that's something that is not obviously a standard or obviously exceeds standard. So if there is some kind of concern or question about the quality of the response, just taking a screenshot of that response or a couple of those responses and providing that along with the documentation, so the program director in charge can also assess it. And of course, if they have to go into the course shell the second time and kind of review based on the information and input that was provided from the admin, they can do that being equipped already with the data and knowing exactly where to go and what to look for. So even though it's not like we completely nivellate the responses, they're like, good job or well done, but if that's something that is incorporated consistently without specifying what were exactly the strong points of the student post, so that the other students can also read that feedback and benefit from it and maybe implement those same practices in the subsequent weeks. Or if the student had some kind of the points that were not addressed fully, again, following up, asking a question, providing some personal input based on instructor's work experience or teaching experience. That's something that stimulates the discussion in the discussion boards and engages the students and also facilitates their learning experience, because we noticed that the instructors who are constantly participating in the discussion boards, those discussion boards are usually very lively. There's lots of great ideas floating around. So it's real course where everyone is having fun and everyone is learning from each other and not afraid to provide their point of view. And that's something that we want to see. Some of the information I would put in the footnotes is basically practice what you preach. So if that's something that there are certain sets of requirements that you have for the students and for the quality of their discussion posts, that's something that you need to follow yourself to set the best example of how it is supposed to be done. For the total grade column, again, something that has been reiterated already multiple times, total grade column must equal to 7 points. There might be some slight deviations to several decimals, and that might be happening based on the transfer of the rubrics from the course shells or connection to some other resource. And so if they're minor and they're explained by some external reasons, it's fine. But if there's a significant deviation from the standard, we require it to be adjusted and to be looked into. Grading is performed in a timely manner, consistent use of rubrics, as I mentioned already, okay to skip for minor announcement that were awarded full points, minor assignments, sorry, that were awarded full points. Meaningful and respectful feedback which addresses strong points and shortcomings of submissions. So something that is explaining exactly, especially for those assignments that were not awarded full points, explaining explicitly what was going on wrong in the course. And also, one of the reasons why we enforce timeliness is that the students next week, they are completing the assignment, they're completing the discussion board again, for instance. They're able to improve and to take benefit of those insights from the instructor. So in regards to how the process is conducted and how the process is completed after the admin goes into the course shell and completes a review, it really depends on the school preferences. It can be done as a bulk per course administrator, or it can be done and then the course administrator may be notified as the admin goes through the course shells. It really depends on the amount of work that needs to be done in the shell at that time frame. But the admin would go into the course shell, will complete the review, document all the things that were observed in the course shell. And if there are any issues, or if you're following the practice of praising your instructors, if there are any great strong points being observed, notifies the course administrator, a program director about it, supplemented with the screenshots, and then program director takes it from there, being responsible for contacting their faculty and working with them. So that's it for the midterm shell review, and now we are open to your questions and input. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anna. Nice job. All right, other questions? Let's see what's in the chat here.
Sure, this is Steve.
Go ahead.
I just want to make sure, and I may have just missed it in the last little bit while I was warming my tea up. With the results or data here, are we still saying that the people from CityU who will contact instructors are their program managers or program directors as opposed to somebody else?
Yes.
Yes, yes, I can confirm that. So basically, you are provided with a tool set with the information about the course shell and what was observed. And specifically in our schools, we're doing our best to make that documentation as detailed as possible, partly because the course shells are disabled over the time. So you don't have access to that information anymore. And you can just use that documentation to learn what was the instructor performance in the preceding quarters. And also, admin is basically an extra set of eyes for you, with saving your time. And then you're using that information to make conclusions and then contact your instructor with the insights of what they need to change or adjust.
Okay, no, that's great, because the instructors who have been, let's say I noticed something, but we'd much rather have it be the faculty who works with them let them know than just somebody else, not in a negative way, but a disembodied person.
Yes, absolutely. Also, as I was mentioning previously, admins don't hold this amount, of this authority to. And I noticed in one of the terms that I was trying to reaching out myself to save the time.
Right.
At first, like, who are you?
Yeah.
And then over the time, they're kind of getting used to that type of communication that would reach out to me themselves to look into it. But I absolutely understand your concern.
Thank you very much, Anna. And I see Scott head nods too. So thank you as well, Scott.
Yeah, I definitely want you guys to be having those conversations. This is really just meant to be helpful information to guide those sessions. And sometimes you'll have the context to know, oh, that's a non-issue, or
Right.
Yep, I've talked about this already. We need to reinforce this. Anna, Susan has also asked, and that might help folks, where this information goes once you input it and how the program directors and managers can access it.
So it really depends on how the program directors prefer to conduct the review. All the information is housed in the Power Apps. So once the MidQuarter shell review is completed and it's under update MidQuarter shell review, and you can just go into the system, click on the button, and then access the record for this for the instructor. There are several filters that are available. So based on the course administrator, but based on the specific course that you're able to use to find the record quickly.
So let me have a follow-up question. So, Anna, thank you for your presentation first. Yeah, so instructor cannot see this data. Am I correct?
No. That's only for administrative faculty.
Right. Then also the other one, no, this is a totally separate issue. So, we are human beings. So people, always I'm saying this is a simple human being. So by having minimal effort, we want to get the maximum outcomes, right? Looks like. If I'm the instructor, then I'm teaching at the CDU. Wow, this guy is checking many things. Okay, it's good, but I have to do the work hard, okay, to put into those things respond. I know we can ask that. The other one, Scott, you are here. I don't know, by using AI, whatever, then some portion can you automate it, something like that. One example, I saw the old advertisement. Then I asked my team to keep the advertisement announcement from last quarter. Usually 80% of them are used again. Looks like then certain faculty smart enough, they made some template. I saw that. And also by using the time control, so it will be turned on, and then they can add something. That's just my 2 cents. So because all of our industry profess, to them, this kind of a compensation, some of them, okay, that's not a big deal. So I'm thinking that one, how much we can automate this one at the same time, then we can reduce their workload. Just a 2 cents, yeah.
Yeah.
I understand that it's a little more specific for the School of Technology and Computing because there's more assignments that the instructor has to cater to because there's hands-on practice, the programming exercise, Instead of one discussion, there are several ones. So that's, again, it can be more dispersed. So those 50% can be more dispersed, along different activities, but it has to be there. That's the most important.
Yeah.
I interrupted.
And to the automation point, we don't yet have full visibility into it, obviously, because we're not in there, but D2L we know has some of this capability to better monitor faculty activity. And so we're hoping that some of this can be automated and not be as labor intensive, but knowing how labor intensive it is, that's part of why we put this process in place. So Anna and team can kind of be trained in this and effective at it, and then provide you the information to act on when it's appropriate.
Anna, this is Joel, and I've got a quick question in terms of the timing. When we say mid-quarter, obviously in a 10-week quarter, that's week 5. So would the assessment occur at the beginning or end of week 5 or 4? I mean, because courses have varying levels of activities in different weeks, the determination of when the actual midpoint to get the most data would be, might be helpful for your team to know. But on that, once the information is gathered, how soon after the assessment will those results be seen so that a course administrator can make adjustments for the second half of the course?
Thank you, Joel. That's a really great question. So based on the instructions that we are provided, we are required to conduct mid-quarter shell review weeks 4 through week 8. And so it really depends on the admin support judgment and then program director's requirements. So that's something that we are not determining on our own. That's a collective decision. And so based on, again, that's all based on my own experience of doing those. Those instructors who need the most attention. So that's either the first year instructor. It might necessarily be that way that they need extra attention, but we just make sure that we address them first because we don't have any type of preceding data on them. And just making sure that they're doing well and they're doing okay and they don't have any questions or concerns at this point. So that's not only to critique them, but also to help them. And also if we have instructors who are constantly having similar issues and we want to make sure that we catch them early on. And then, so that will be roughly, if we would like to pinpoint specific time frame, it will be week 4 and 5. And then 6, 7, 8 is kind of working with those who are at standard and those who are exceeding standard. Those who are exceeding standard, it's usually at the very end. Again, there sometimes might be additional judgment that is required. For instance, you're going into the shell and you don't see any major type of assignments being graded yet. And so you can't really assess how good instructor is at reading those. So admin can go back, make a note. So I'm waiting for more data, logging out, coming back when this assignment is due, checking again if they need to. Or predominantly the midterm shell review, its first and foremost requirement is to catch those that are not performing well and make sure that at least for the second portion of the course, the students will be satisfied with what they see.
And Susan, you're correct. There is no automated announcement to faculty at all.
Yes,
Yes.
they're not notified. They don't have access to the information. That's something for you to work with and then implement it and contact them directly via email if you need to.
Yeah. Mike has a question in the chat about where to find the quick links.
The quick links. Yeah, actually, we were discussing it with Mariah before the meeting. We're going to collect all of those PowerPoint presentations that you saw in the PDF format. And then there's an active link to the quick links. So once you receive the document, and if you want it sooner, you can definitely let me know and I will send it to you directly. But Mariah will be sending it out as a bulk, all 3 of the PowerPoint presentations.
Great, thank you. All right, I don't see any other questions in the chat. Anything else anyone wants to ask in person? Excellent. Well, thank you all for your time today. Again, I really am appreciative of your work and to all the admins that conduct these. Again, this was something that we saw in School of Business is highly effective, and where we've started to see it rolled out in other schools, we've already seen some positive impact on helping everyone provide the best experience for our students. So thank you for your time today. You get a few minutes back. We're done a little early, and we'll see you soon. Take care.
Everyone, of course, if you have any additional questions, please let me know either in Teams or in email. Bye. Take care.
Peace. Bye.
Thank you, Anna.
Bye.
Bye.